October 19, 2025. Diwali in Trinidad and Tobago should have been a time of celebration, but instead, anxiety gripped the nation. The U.S. State Department issued a rare, targeted security alert, warning Americans to avoid all U.S. government facilities in the country. This wasn't a routine advisory. It signaled a credible, localized threat, shaking both the expatriate and local communities. The timing during Diwali heightened fears, turning a joyful holiday into a tense waiting game. The alert followed a recent U.S. drone strike in the region, making clear that distant geopolitical conflicts had arrived on Trinidad's doorstep. Suddenly, the tranquil Caribbean was a new front in American military operations, and Trinidadians were left questioning how their peaceful nation became the focus of such a warning. The answers lie in a web of military actions and high-stakes political maneuvering that have drawn Trinidad and Tobago into a dangerous geopolitical game. The holiday weekend became a period of watchful waiting as the nation braced for what might come next. The immediate trigger for the security alert was a U.S. drone strike that destroyed a vessel in the Caribbean Sea, killing 6, including 2 Trinidadian nationals. The use of drones for lethal action marked a dramatic escalation, bringing the U.S. military campaign uncomfortably close to home. This was not an isolated incident. Since September, at least 6 similar strikes have killed nearly 30 people in international waters. The U.S. justifies these actions as part of a counter-narco-terrorism campaign. But the expanded CIA authority for lethal operations blurs the line between intelligence and warfare. For Trinidad, the deaths of its citizens have ignited fierce debate about sovereignty and the nation's entanglement in U.S. regional strategy. The government faces pressure to respond, but is caught between protecting its citizens and maintaining its alliance with Washington. For families, it's a personal tragedy. For the nation, a warning that its waters are now a conflict zone. The incident has forced Trinidadians to confront the reality that their country is no longer insulated from global power struggles. The Caribbean is now a stage for high-stakes military operations, with local lives at risk. The drone strikes are just one part of a broader U.S. military buildup in the southern Caribbean. The Trump administration has increased naval patrols, deploying advanced warships near Venezuela, signaling a long-term commitment to projecting power in the region. The campaign, officially targeting narco-terrorism, now includes covert CIA land operations inside Venezuela, dramatically raising the stakes. A sudden leadership change at U.S. Southern Command has fueled speculation of further escalation. The Caribbean, once a zone of peace, is now a theater for great power confrontation. For Trinidad and Tobago, this means living next to an active military front, with all the risks of miscalculation and collateral damage. The region's security landscape has fundamentally changed, and the old sense of insulation from global conflict is gone. The U.S. posture is forcing Caribbean nations to reconsider their own security and alliances. The risk of unintended escalation has never been higher. Trinidad and Tobago's fate is tied to geography. It sits just 7 miles from Venezuela. The Gulf of Paria is a corridor for trade, refugees, and illicit flows, making Trinidad a strategic asset for any power monitoring Venezuela. For the U.S., Trinidad is an ideal base for surveillance and potential operations. For Venezuela, it's both a lifeline and a vulnerability. The presence of U.S. military assets so close to Venezuela is seen as a direct threat by Caracas, raising the risk of confrontation. Trinidad's government must balance its relationship with the U.S. and its volatile neighbor, knowing any misstep could have severe consequences. The nation's strategic position elevates its importance but also its exposure to great power rivalry. Trinidad is now a pawn on a geopolitical chessboard, forced to navigate between competing interests. The government's choices will shape its security and economic future. The stakes are high and the margin for error is slim. Trinidad's proximity to Venezuela has never been more perilous. The Trinidadian government's response to the drone strike was silence. No public condemnation, no clear explanation. Prime Minister Persad-Bissessar's absence from parliamentary debate fueled speculation of quiet alignment with U.S. policy. Some believe the government had access to U.S. intelligence implicating the deceased, making public protest politically risky. The opposition accuses the government of sacrificing sovereignty for U.S. favor, while the public is divided between trust and outrage. This silence has exposed deep political fissures and raised questions about transparency and accountability. By not denouncing the strike, Trinidad risks being seen as complicit in U.S. actions, potentially inviting retaliation from Venezuela. The government's calculated quiet may protect its alliance with Washington, but it comes at the cost of domestic trust and regional solidarity. Trinidad's stance has made it a key player and a potential target in the unfolding conflict. The nation's neutrality is now in question. The military escalation is rooted in years of U.S.-Venezuela hostility, intensified after the disputed 2024 Venezuelan election. The U.S. imposed harsh sanctions and revoked protected status for Venezuelans, signaling a shift to maximum pressure. Washington now frames Venezuela as a narco-terrorist threat, justifying military buildup and covert operations in the region. Every drone strike and naval patrol is a message to Caracas, and a warning to its neighbors. For Trinidad and Tobago, this means living with the constant risk of being drawn into a wider conflict. The U.S. strategy has turned the Caribbean into a potential war zone, raising the stakes for every nation nearby. Venezuela, feeling cornered, may lash out at perceived U.S. partners, increasing the danger for Trinidad. The region is now a tinderbox, with Trinidad at its center. As tensions rose, CARICOM, the Caribbean's regional bloc, issued a strong call for peace, reaffirming the region's status as a zone of peace. The statement urged all parties to respect sovereignty and resolve disputes through diplomacy, implicitly criticizing U.S. unilateral military actions. CARICOM insisted that anti-narcotics efforts must follow international law, challenging the legality of U.S. drone strikes. But Trinidad and Tobago refused to endorse the statement, breaking ranks with its neighbors. This public split isolated Trinidad within CARICOM and signaled its alignment with U.S. strategy. The division weakens regional solidarity and undermines the bloc's ability to act as a neutral broker. For the U.S., Trinidad's stance is a diplomatic win. For the Caribbean, it's a source of concern. The region's unity is fractured at a critical moment. Trinidad's decision has lasting implications for its role in the Caribbean. The crisis has sparked fear and debate among Trinidadians who feel caught in a conflict not of their making. The U.S. security alert brought the threat home, while government silence deepened public anxiety. Civil society groups demand transparency and an investigation into the drone strike deaths, questioning the legality of U.S. actions. Many argue that close alignment with the U.S. could provoke retaliation and make Trinidad less safe. Internationally, U.S. allies are wary of military escalation, preferring sanctions and diplomacy, while Venezuela's allies condemn the strikes as imperial overreach. The world is watching Trinidad as a test case for the consequences of modern hybrid warfare. For locals, it's about safety and sovereignty. For rights groups, it's about justice and the rule of law. The crisis has put Trinidad in the global spotlight, highlighting the risks of being a pawn in great power competition. The nation's future and its security hang in the balance. The stakes have never been higher for Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago stands at a crossroads, its stability threatened by U.S. military actions, drone strikes, and regional divisions. The outcome depends on whether the immediate threat materializes or tensions subside. The U.S. has shown it's willing to use force in the region, forcing Caribbean nations to reconsider their alliances. The concept of the Caribbean as a zone of peace is under threat, and Trinidad is now on the front lines of a global conflict. The government's silent alignment with the U.S. has cost it regional trust and domestic confidence. Navigating this landscape will require diplomatic skill and a focus on national security above all else. Trinidad's experience is a stark lesson in how quickly a nation can be drawn into great power rivalry. The world can only hope that diplomacy prevails before the fragile peace is lost.